Hello, good morning, everyone. Today I will be doing the final presentation on one of the stories that I picked today, and I will be explaining to you guys about the story and give you guys some insight on that, and as well as the author. And my name is Julissa Olivo, and let's get started. So, today I will be discussing Hamlet by William Shakespeare. And I did want to also add some images on Shakespeare. That way, you guys are well aware of who he is, what he may have looked like. And also, I believe that the images help describe what kind of time he was living in. Because keep in mind, these pictures are from the 1500s. So you can see that the style was different. And um, the whole aesthetic prospect is different. William Shakespeare was well known in the 1500s and 1600s and still to this day. Shakespeare was originally born in April in the 1500s, and he is from England, which is located in the United Kingdom. Mainly, he was known for his poetry, acting, and his playwriting styles, and he has won many awards over that as well. And still to this day, he's still taught among schools, and it's estimated to be around 500, 600 ish years later that he's still taught in schools, which I think is very awesome. He's a very talented writer, and he's primarily known for his writing style, which tended to use a lot more metaphors. And in some of the stories, people may say that he even exaggerated in some of it. And because of his writing style, it made William Shakespeare stand out a lot more to your average reader or your average listener. Um, which I thoroughly enjoy his stories. I think he's very talented. But William Shakespeare was married to Annie Hathaway. Um, Annie and William were both known to be very private, so there isn't much information about their personal life or their personal interests, of course, other than screenwriting and writing. Um, there's not much information on what kind of people they were other than authors. Annie Hathaway, she wasn't a writer, but she thoroughly enjoyed William Shakespeare's stories and she supported him along the way. And she also had kids with William. Um, Unfortunately, though, he was 52 when he passed away in 1616. And unfortunately, we do not know why he passed away. Um, there was no known reason. Let's continue. All right, so the main reason why I decided to pick Hamlet by William Shakespeare is because I do connect with Hamlet in a personal way because I feel as though grieving is such a hard part in someone's life. And I feel as though Hamlet had every right to act the way he did, which I will later elaborate on. And I feel like it was such a deep and emotional story. And I feel as though at the end of the day, it's just this boy who loves his father so much that he wants to avenge his death and he wants to figure out who did it and why and, you know, see how he can handle it from there. And Hamlet stood out to me compared to the other stories more so because I feel like we can relate to Hamlet on a different level, especially when it comes to the grieving process and how sad it is and how it could change you as a person. But in Hamlet, there's multiple themes, and the main ones that I do want to mention is going to be appearance versus reality, corruption, morality, and revenge. So, in the story Hamlet is told by the ghost of his father to avenge the character who murdered him, and later on reveals that the killer was Hamlet's uncle. So, pretty much Hamlet in the story saw an illusion of his father, some ghost figure, and he was able to talk to this ghost figure of his father, and his father mentioned to him that he was murdered by his uncle, Hamlet's uncle. And Hamlet then later on goes to avenge his father and decides on how he's going to do such when it comes to his uncle. Well, let's continue. So I do want to also mention, I know I am throwing a couple names out there. There are different characters in Hamlet, but the main ones that I want to cover, of course, is Hamlet, which is the protagonist. He did struggle with his mental health. He was known to have schizophrenia, hallucinations, and depression, and even more. And of course, as I have mentioned, um he did seek revenge for his father passing. He did want to figure out who did it and what kind of consequences they would get, which of course is his uncle, as I said. He is the prince of Denmark, and he had a lot of hatred towards his uncle for killing his father. And he was obsessed with his father's death. And being obsessed with your father's death, what I mean is that he did not eat and sleep. Like, all he thought about was his father's death and how he was going to avenge his father and how he was going to get justice for his father. And he does have hatred towards his uncle, of course, as I did mention, because he did a bunch of cruel things to his father. That way he can take over the throne and even marry Hamlet's wife, Hamlet's mother, sorry. And let's see, Claudius too. He's also the antagonist. He's a politician, so he's very political. He has his morals, and he has this set point of view on how life should be and how it should be operated. Because he's more on the political side, he unfortunately doesn't value others or even family or the opinions of anyone else but himself. He did kill Hamlet's father, as mentioned, and he had this drive of power because, as I mentioned before, he wanted power. So he unfortunately killed Hamlet's father in hopes of getting power and overcoming the throne that his father had. He is manipulative, which means that um, he kind of tricks the characters into thinking that he's this great guy and that he wants what's best, but unfortunately he's more on the evil side and he doesn't really care about you. He just wants to make you feel like you're cared about. That way he can kind of take more advantage of you. And because of this, oftentimes he does show signs of guilt in the story. So, symbols in Hamlet that illustrate appearance versus reality, which is one of the themes that I mainly wanted to talk about. Hamlet's anxiety shows a version that counters the truth, because since Hamlet is hallucinating and seeing these versions that aren't quite real, most of the time in the story they are telling him the truth, but from a different point of view, in sense, because, for example, when he saw the ghost of his father, um he encountered the truth that way, although it was a hallucination or perhaps maybe even schizophrenia, because obviously the ghost of his father wasn't even there. So although he was hallucinating, he still was able to grasp the truth from his father that told him who the murderer was. And in the story, Hamlet appears to be wearing dark clothes, which also symbolizes like the sadness he's experiencing while he's grieving the loss of his father, and while he's also experiencing the fact that he knows that his uncle brutally murdered his father. So I think that the dark clothing is a very important aspect because it shows us that he's not in the state of mind where he's happy or content or satisfied. Even it shows that he's sad and he has this lack of care in himself, and he kind of lost himself as a character. And of course, the ghost of Hamlet's father also symbolizes the dishonesty of the peers, because none of them were aware that his uncle was the one who murdered him. And it shows that they weren't loyal to Hamlet himself. And even the uncle did not come forward and say, hey, like, unfortunately, I'm not proud of it, but I murdered your father. Not once was anyone honest with Hamlet when it came to his father's death. And I also do want to mention the Yorick skull in Hamlet symbolizes death because it shows that death is not avoidable and death is a natural process of life, and that regardless of when, where, and how, death is not something you can run away from. And I did also want to add a little picture of a ghost to symbolize his father and a little quote from him, which I think is very cool. So, also, as well as the symbols in Hamlet, there's also irony involved and appearance versus reality. So, in the story, Hamlet pretends to be angry and insane, which causes other characters and people in the story to think that he's gone insane for no reason. And what I mean by this is because he's acting like a madman, people are suddenly confused on the change, and they think that because of this change, he is going through something, and that for whatever reason they don't take into consideration that he's going through this process because of his father. They do believe that he had no reason to go mad all of a sudden. um and because of him pretending to be angry as well, it does cause other characters to look at him differently, and it causes them to take him less serious in a way because of his mental state. And while spying on Hamlet's conversation with his mother, Hamlet accidentally kills a character named I can't speak. Polonius, excuse me. um, because he had mistaken him for Claudius. So, in the story, Polonius is spying on Hamlet having a conversation with his mother, and unfortunately, his mother screams and Hamlet gets scared. So, Hamlet goes out to look what his mother is screaming at, and he sees Polonius, which he confuses him for Claudius, which is Hamlet's uncle who killed his father. He mistaken him for him, and he brutally murdered him, unfortunately, due to the mistaken aspects of thinking it was someone else. And all in all, I did just want to also say that Hamlet, I believe, has a deeper message in the story, and um and the message behind Hamlet is just how important it is to avenge someone's death and get revenge on who who killed one of your loved ones, and how important it is to seek reasoning and to not let anyone stop you from figuring out what's right and even what's wrong. And unfortunately, at the end, Hamlet does die because he is stabbed by Lawrence with a blade that was poisoned by Claudius. And although he wasn't able to avenge his father's death, it is very important to see the efforts that he made to do so, and to appreciate the fact that although although he wasn't able to avenge his father's death, that he died trying to do such. And I think it's such a powerful message, and I think it's very important to acknowledge. But thank you everybody for listening, and yeah, thank you. I'm going to close this off right now. Have a great one, you guys. Bye-bye.